and welcome to Behind the Gavel. I'm Lori Jennings, Public Information Officer for Lower Merion Township, and I'm joined, as always, by Board of Commissioners President Dan Bernheim. Thank you for joining me today.
And as always, it is a pleasure, Lori.
Thank you. It has been a busy month here at the Township, and as we continue to slowly work our way back into a post-COVID normal, we bid a fond farewell to Bob Duncan, our outgoing Assistant Township Manager, and welcomed a number of your colleagues back to the boardroom, which we'll get to right after we talk about the budget.
All right, well then, first things first, dollars before sentiment. We had an excellent presentation by our CFO, Eric Traub. We're really lucky to have somebody of his class and skills, and I wish I could duplicate how well he went through that, noting what's gone on from here we are in 2021. And we had to prepare for what was upcoming as the world went into an economic coma for 2020. And we really did an excellent job, not to pat ourselves on the back, but we deserve the pat on the back. So we had anticipated from the start that we could be off about $4 million in revenue. We were off 3.8. And we also anticipated there'd be, a difference in expenses, and indeed there was, but it was about 2.6 million less. So the crunch wasn't as severe as we were planning. So when we look going forward, it's been rolled out that, we're okay in the first part of 2021. So if you try to do a quick analysis of it, most of our income comes from real estate taxes. Well, that wasn't impacted by the pandemic, its value, but the collection speed may be a little bit off. And our concern always was the real estate transfer taxes and the business privilege taxes, how those would play out. So real estate transfer taxes, less places being sold during the pandemic, less transfers, less taxes. But now if you take a look what's going on in the real estate market in Lower Merion,
and all over.
Yeah, here it's nuts. The comment is by the realtors, make an offer before you make an appointment.
Absolutely.
Places are flying off the shelf and above asking, which is crazy. But, for the world of transfer taxes, that's nice. And there have been some commercial properties which have sold. So that's had to bounce back. And then on the business privilege tax, that's always predicated on the prior year. So for 2020, you'd look at the prior year being 2019. Mm-hmm. That's not impacted by the pandemic. So the concern was, oops, what's going to happen in 2021 based on 2020? And it hasn't been as severe as what we thought. So we're sitting in pretty good shape, and in large part because of some pretty good planning.
Absolutely. The bulk of the discussion was centered on the American Rescue Plan passed by Congress this winter. What should residents know about this plan and how it relates to the township?
Well, we're going to receive about $25 million in change. So after each commissioner gets a new car, what happens is the Department of Treasury's got to go ahead and give us the guidelines of what's going to occur. And it's going to come out in two separate tranches, one now and one next year. So once we get those guidelines, we can utilize it for what some of the shortfalls were, for what we had, on income and for some of the projects. One of the reasons we had the savings I referenced is we put the brakes on certain projects, mm-hmm. which really need to be done. So this may help. And we need to be careful that when we make the decision of where we're going to put the money, to recognize this is a one-time, as somebody put it, pennies from heaven or pennies from Congress event. So we can't create something that's going to be an ongoing project and need ongoing funds because there's a shelf life to this.
Right.
So we have a lot of planning to do once we get the guidelines so we know how to stay in the appropriate lanes that the Department of Treasury is going to tell us we have to be.
Do we have any idea when maybe that funding might become available?
Yeah, I think there's something in this year, and then, because my recollection is we have to have this all accounted for by December 31, 2024, as the date. So it'll be forthcoming, and I assure you there will be some entertaining conversations with my colleagues.
To digress just a bit, there are also some opportunities for funds in the form of reimbursements from the state as well as pandemic-related expenses.
Yeah, we've applied where we're going to be able to get, some of those revenue, some of those funds to offset the costs we had in connection with, some of the police work that was done and other things. So our staff here is really on top of that and has been very diligent, in the application. So we hope that, we get our piece of that pie to offset some of those costs as well.
And what are the next steps in the budget process?
So annually, we go through the process where we have our CIP, our 6-year lookout on our projects, which is really unique. You're not going to find many municipalities that do that or counties. So we review it on a regular basis, and I know that department heads have already been putting together their wish list, which I'm sure will be significant given the brakes that were put on things because of the pandemic. That will roll out to us, and then we'll start focusing on what is it that we have to fund, and take a look at, well, it's been 10 years now since there's a tax increase, and pre-pandemic, I said my crystal ball said don't expect another, but we will see.
Yep. So overall, what should our residents know about the financial state of the township as we enter into the summer of 2021?
Yeah, well, the State of the Union is really good. And the risk of being redundant in large part because of the planning that we had in trying to anticipate what would occur with revenues and how we have contained appropriately expenses, have been careful on, in reference, personnel expenses, salary. I mean, we were hit with some, winter storms this year, which were unlike the past. So ballpark, we spent about $650,000 connected with that overtime, salt, et cetera, versus prior years have probably been about, under $250,000. So we've, handled all of that well. So we sit in a pretty good situation as Lower Merion generally does. I believe our fund balance is still about 28% or so of our expenditures, which is above what our general goal is, which is good. So we'll have to see how the next quarter unfolds as we really hopefully break out of this pandemic and get back to life as normal as many of us are dying to get back to.
Absolutely. So we have a few minutes left before we have to take a break. And I think we can now safely pivot to our COVID updates, away from the raw numbers and toward our reopening plans.
Yeah, look, as you know, we were on the front end of some things. We were the first township to open tennis courts when that occurred. And there were a lot of people who were concerned. That worked out well. We then opened our libraries, and that has worked out extraordinarily well. People have been very, very cooperative. And now it's time to focus on our township building. People come here for a lot of services, and while we have put in place protocols where people can call and make appointments and do things, and we've been appearing to operate smoothly, we really don't know what we're missing by not doing it in the norm. So we've rolled out a target date of July 12th of what we're going to do. We use that date as where we think everybody will then have the opportunity to have been vaccinated plus 14 days after the second one, and that would be safe conditions. We'll still have appropriate protocols in place. We get numbers, as you well know, because you help circulate them all the time, from various sources that tell us what's happening with the COVID rate, with positivity rates, not just here in Lower Merion, but the surrounding area, Montgomery County and others, because we have people that come in from there. And we'll be guided by that as we set up the protocols. Again, with everybody looking forward to the point where, you're saving your masks for Halloween.
So to that end, the board took a big step in May by welcoming back several of your colleagues to the boardroom. What are your thoughts on that occasion?
Well, you're talking about where we had the opportunity to say thanks to Bob Duncan, no doubt. And no matter whatever words that we were going to muster amongst any one of us, we were going to fall short. But it was really nice. A large number of prior commissioners made time to get on Zoom and to make a couple comments. And everybody echoed the same thing of what a gentleman Bob was, and what a pleasure to deal with. His knowledge depth was, beyond description as well. And everybody, just wished him, the very, very best. We're very lucky. We got Jeff Smith coming in who had been in Delaware County and Sarasota, and our timing, worked out for us because he was coming back east, and we snagged him. So he knows that he's got some big shoes to fill, but a lot of really good people around him to help him do that.
Absolutely. So is there anything else COVID related you'd like to mention?
I think that one of the things that is really key for us to get out of this, and that is for people to understand the importance of being vaccinated. And there are still a decent percentage of those that are hesitant. There's an understandable as to what or why, but whatever they can do to investigate their concerns so they would have the comfort level of getting that vaccination and find out it is safe, it is effective, and this is the way back for us to hit norm. It is dealing with the different variants that's there. That's really at this point probably the most important thing. Check, be it with your physician, your neighbor, somebody you trust, to figure out if they're doing it, what's the reason that you're not, and whether that answer is there. And if it's medical reasons, we have folks, even our health advisory group stated, and they're all top-notch physicians, they make themselves available to answer questions, and we can arrange that as well.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground so far, but there's more to get to. Stay tuned, and we'll be back with more Behind the Gavel after this. Welcome back to Behind the Gavel. I'm Lori Jennings, here with Board President Dan Bernheim. Dan, thanks again for being here with me today.
And again, always a pleasure.
There's been an ongoing topic here at the Township related to the proposed playing fields at the new middle school. Do we have any updates on that?
Well, indeed we do. So, as most people know, the new middle school, where it's located, doesn't have enough fields on that spot. So the school did acquire some properties fairly close where they mapped out the configuration of their fields. But in the course of so doing, it was going to require the removal of something like 400 trees. And people had a very understandable adverse reaction to that and question, all right, is it really necessary? Is there a plan B that's out there? So we have been working with the school district, and it was about to come before the board. And at my request, I met with the president of the school board. Along with me was Vice President Gavrin and Commissioner Ray Courtney, Chris Leswing. And the school board was there with Lucy Klain and Melissa Gilbert, as well as Superintendent Copeland and Jim Lill, and their two lawyers. So we had a discussion about, all right, what are the alternatives, what's out there, both physically, what are the legal requirements that are there. And at the end of the meeting, they agreed to put the brakes on this so we can make sure that we're not missing any alternatives as opposed to this plan. I give Andy Gavrin as much credit as I can muster for the amount of work and energy that he has put into this in order to see if there's something else that can be done. So there are a couple ideas that are in the works. I'm not going to give you the scoop, and up your ratings that we have, which we're keeping our fingers crossed. We'll say we are cautiously optimistic that we have, found something that we need to then review with the school board and see if we can get them on board and find something that'll be palatable to everybody's needs and desires without having to remove that many trees on property, which is really pretty special.
Absolutely. The board recently heard an agenda item related to hiring police officers. Can you explain the results of the vote on that item?
I wish I could. So I think there is no mystery that I have the utmost respect for my colleagues. And we agree, in times we disagree, but it's usually well thought out. this is one where I sharply disagree with my colleagues on what occurred and what happened. So in reference to our police force, we have our full complement about 136, and we were down 11 officers. There's an entire process that takes place to get an officers. They have to go through the civil service exam, then they have to go through some other qualifications. And out of the applicants, at one point we had 14 that qualified. It was down to 8, which means we're still off because we were off 11. And by the time we went to vote, there were 7 that were left. I knew that my colleagues were aiming towards 6, which I disagreed with, and I wanted them to go just one more, because that would be the max, noting that there's a substantial possibility that we may even only end up with 6. But in order to up that ante, it's a whole long process because you then have to get more applicants, go back through the civil service test, and we're talking almost another year. So unfortunately, that vote did not go in the favor that I wanted it to. And what we then have to recognize is that was inconsistent with what the superintendent recommended, what our township manager recommended, and to the other side of the coin of that decision was the concern that there's a large cost for our police force. It's 42% of our budget. So what I try to encourage my colleagues to think about is if there are cost savings to be made, now's not the time to do it in personnel. There may be other areas to explore, but this wasn't it. So what I thought was a good, cogent, logical argument didn't carry the day. That happens from time to time. As I said, I respect my colleagues, but I sharply disagree on this one. And I think we'll then have to do with what we have to evaluate what the situation is. And when we roll around for that, next civil service exam, take a look and say, all right, do we need some course correction? And, I'm hopeful at that point there'll be a different result.
So what's going to happen next?
So what occurs is that, we have, I think, one of the finest police groups there is. I know from our command staff, who is down, I believe, 1 lieutenant, and the frontline officers who will be down some, they will still do their job, and whatever it takes to fulfill those roles, they will do it. They will fulfill whatever training that they need to do to stay on top of various programs. The residents aren't going to feel it at all. It'll be the people in the trenches that are going to notice what additional work is necessary or loads that are carried on them, and we'll have to evaluate how we deal with that.
A quick aside, the board also voted to approve the resolution urging the State General Assembly to authorize municipal police officers' use of radar in traffic enforcement. So what are the prospects for this bill?
Well, one would only hope that in Harrisburg they will allow us to join 1950s technology. I've been working on this with a bunch of other commissioners throughout the state for a long period of time. I've told the story. It's probably lost its humorous punch at this point. That one particular township, they had police officers holding hair dryers outside the side of their car to make it look like they had radar. And it is time to allow us to have that tool in order to help control speeding, which we have not had. So there is belief that finally in Harrisburg, this will be something that will pass. One might say, well, what is stopping it? Well, there's certain areas where they're concerned that what will occur is that it'll increase traffic and or fines that people have to pay, and they'll complain about it up the line to various, politicians or what have you, to which I've always said, well, you tell them you get a ticket, you pay for it, and what I offered in Lower Merion, we'll contribute every single penny we get to whatever fund you want. Just give us this, because it's a matter of public safety.
Absolutely.
So we will see what we will see, and hopefully this time it'll work out, because I believe that all of my colleagues on the board will tell you still the number one complaint they get is about traffic, and the number one of that is about speeding in their area.
I'd like to wrap up this month's show by talking about the future. The board recently voted on a resolution pointed toward a sustainable future for the township. And how did that resolution come about?
Well, we have been, in my humble opinion, on the cutting edge of environmental concerns and energy concerns. I'm sure you'll recall that we went for almost a couple of years with our manager trying to come up with a whole program for us in connection with energy savings, and there's a whole list of items that we have done, from even just changing our street lights out there to LED lights, things of that nature. But we live in a world where the carbon footprint that's out there is of great concern. And failure to recognize that trying to get to zero carbon is really just denying some reality. It is something that is forthcoming. You listen to all of the automobile companies. Their design is going to be the electric cars. Everybody's going to be moving in this direction. So we had a resolution that was passed that said, look, we're committed to getting there with some type of timetables. Recognize it's a resolution, which is just establishing what we would like to set as policy. The actual implementation of that, we look forward to from our EAC coming up with a plan. We're about to hire a sustainability director in order to work to go forward with this. And you asked a question of how. Credit has to go where credit's deserved, and Commissioner Ray Courtney has been a true proponent of this. I think from the day he stepped forward to ask to be on the board, he said, I have a key and fundamental issue, and that being sustainability, and he's been true to his word. So I give Ray a lot of credit for working on this, but also a lot goes to the EAC and EIC and a number of other people who are really, especially within the township, not just our residents, who are looking forward and saying, all right, the win is now. The only question is how we get there.
Anything else before we adjourn for the month?
Well, there are no other major hot topics that are out there more township wide, as you and I said in the first segment. We're still in pandemic mode. We're not out of those woods yet. Mm-hmm. And it is still necessary to be very cautious about what you do and how you do it, and that the vaccine, it seems to be our clear path to going back to normal. It was nice to see some sporting events where there are people there, and be it the Sixers, the Phillies, although watching them has been a little bit difficult of late. But to see us getting back to normal, go out to restaurants and being able to have our local shops open up for people. So with the weather being warm and Memorial Day right around the corner, I think we're all looking forward to being able to get outdoors and get back to normal, and here at the township as well.
Right. And if anyone is still looking to get a vaccine, they can visit Montgomery County's website, and there are a lot of walk-in clinics. Everything is free, so if anyone is interested, they certainly can reach out there and look to see where they can get their vaccine.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. There's no lines anymore. There are just a number of places to go ahead and do this. So yeah, glad you pointed that out. So anybody who's listening and still questioning it, please go do it. It's for your own health, your family's health, and everybody in the community.
That will have to do it for this edition of Behind the Gavel. Thank you, Dan, for your time today, and thank you, Lower Merion, for watching. I'm Lori Jennings, Public Information Officer for Lower Merion Township. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.